Okay, I think we're all set. We're live. For those of you just joining us, this is Warrior Women in Business. We're on episode 48. I am so excited to chat with today's guest, who I think really, for me personally, highlights women supporting women, honestly, Rachel. And Women's History Month, we have International Women's Day coming up. There's so much going on. So my name is Jasmine Sandler. I am the CEO of JS Media. Warrior Women in Business is a division of JS Media, which is a branding and marketing agency since 2006. And Warrior Women in Business actually started because I was running another podcast and I was speaking at a conference, and all these women were coming up to me, and they really, they're go-getters. And I said, you know what? I really need to support women. So I started Warrior Women in Business as actually a podcast and event series to bring female leaders like Rachel, who I'm lucky enough to talk to today, to female entrepreneurs and female executives in transition to entrepreneurship. So it's all about education and authentic support of women. Warrior Women in Business. We're now at episode 48 today. We have a conference series called Brand New, which is reemerging this year. We run singular events, and we're present primarily in New York City and Beverly Hills for those of you that have attended events on both coasts. So that being said, I know Rachel's a very busy woman. I want to jump right into today's episode. So first of all, I'll just say hello, Rachel, to the
Hi, Jasmine. It's so good to be with you.
Absolutely. So I asked Rachel to be on. I was thinking about like women I could have on a Women's History Month, and my God, I have so many great women this month. And I'm starting with Rachel, which I'm really excited about. Rachel and I have known each other for I don't even know how long. Rachel,
I don't either. I'm going to say more than 10 years.
Probably more than 10 years. And she just always amazes me as a personal role model of mine. So I want to give you a little background on Rachel. Rachel puts the word V in Vagipreneur. She's going to talk about that today. When I first started working with Rachel, I don't know, eons ago, I was always kind of shy about talking about what Rachel does. And now I'm like blabbing about it. So she really is an advocate for female sexual health in a number of ways. She has a book that I actually have right here, right underneath me on my bookshelf, Orgasmic Leadership, and she's going to talk about that today. It's a very, very cool book for any of you that are interested in women's health and primarily women's female sexual health and kind of what's going on in that space and how that continues to develop. She has a podcast, which is very, I think, one that I have never heard of actually in terms of the space in women's podcasts. It's really about female sexual health and women's health. It's called The Business of V, which is very cool. She's written, I don't know, hundreds of articles on the subject. I failed to mention, she's a growth strategist and has supported major companies in healthcare, including J&J, Baxter, and the list goes on. So that all being said, again, I want to welcome you to today's fast episode 48, Rachel, and I just want to jump right into some questions. So first of all, you're in a very unique space, female sexual health. Can you talk to us about why you got into this space? Give us a little bit of a story about how you got into it and where you see it going.
You know, some of it was serendipity. Some of it seemed like I was preparing for. With my business partner, Mary, for, decades, we had worked with large companies, J&J, Pfizer, Bayer, Merck, Allergan, really focused on how to drive top line growth. And we dealt with women, as we say, from the tops of their heads to the tips of their toes. So started hair care and landed foot fungus and everything in between. In 2008, we were presented with a business plan that talked about a product that improved arousal, desire, and satisfaction for women of all ages and life stages, topically applied, clinically proven. And there was enough of a confluence of factors in terms of the need for that product at the time, the fact that it piqued our interest, the desire to always work in an emotionally engaging category, and the true need. At the time we got involved, there had been somewhere between 35 and 50 active clinical programs around women's sexual and reproductive health. And at the time we bought this asset, there were less than 5. So, somewhat serendipity because someone sent us this business plan, but it was because we had been doing so much work in that space. And we consider the landscape that we focused on was menstruation through menopause, women's sexual and reproductive health. So anything that's in there. And when you mention the book and the podcast, I just want to be really clear that I approach all of this from a business perspective. You know, you can't be in women's health without being an advocate for women's health. You can't be in women's health without knowing what's happening on a state and national legislative basis. But I'm not the one dispensing healthcare. And one of the things we like about the podcast, my co-host is Dr. Alyssa Dweck, who was a practicing gynecologist, chief medical officer, author, speaker, you know, Jill of all trades, was we focus on the intersection of patient care, unmet needs, unanswered questions, and the businesses being created to respond to those. So it's the yin and the yang. She brings the medical part and the patient care and experience, and I bring the businesses who are taking all kinds of interesting approaches to solving, I'm going to say, problems or dealing with conditions or treating disease or diagnosing things we haven't had good solutions for diagnosing. So all those kinds of things.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I know that one hand, you know, can't wash without the other. You need both sides of it. And it seems like the demand is growing. I mean, I'm happy about that. And I'm sure you're very happy about it in terms of things being brought out into the spotlight and more younger women getting involved with these industries, right?
I'm really excited, and there are a bunch of reasons that that's happening, which I'm happy to talk about, but it sounded like
well, that's what I was gonna ask. It's my next question. So why is like women's health on fire right now? I mean, just as an example, like from my own consumer's perspective, like the his and the hers company, right? Like on the subway, I see ads for women's health and reproductive health and a lot of talk about menopause on the women's podcast world. So why is women's health on fire right now? What's happening?
So it's funny. I give a talk that I titled "In a Hot Flash: Women's Health and Overnight Sensation Centuries in the Making." So women's health isn't new. The concerns about women's health aren't new. The fact that there are many people concerned about women's health isn't new. What is new is this confluence of factors that has been building for a long time, you know, to create this moment of momentum. So starting with, there's more women who are starting companies. There's more discussion about this space, some of which was actually catalyzed by COVID. I can come back to that. There are more women with money and experience who can either run companies, advise companies, or invest in companies. There are new sources of creative capital, which again are teaching women how to invest. And it's not like it's a skill that there are no women who know how to do it, but people who are doing angel investing, you know, private investments, that's relatively new. And the fact that there are now a number of funds that are focused specifically on funding diverse entrepreneurs, which includes but isn't limited to women. I would add to that that nothing grows women's health faster than Oprah saying, "I'm in menopause." So there are a lot of celebrities who have a lot of clout and money and are in the stage where they're talking about it. And when you add all those, things are happening in the workplace. So let's say 20 years ago, Apple, Google, the tech companies of the world realized they were experiencing this incredible brain drain. So people who were of childbearing age were leaving, and a smaller percentage than they would like were coming back. So they built a sort of a portfolio of benefits, whether it was egg freezing, IVF, what they call, and you know, anything in the space of family building. It includes better maternity care, maternity leave, paternity leave, you know, all the things that we now take for granted. They didn't exist, you know, a couple decades ago. What we're seeing now is the same thing happening in menopause. It's motivated. I think it always helps when there's an economic piece to it. You know, there have been studies about the trillions of dollars lost in productivity from women in menopause. 20% of women in menopause are in the workforce. By definition, they tend to be older, more senior roles, have a lot of wisdom to bring. And companies are now seeing the economic value of keeping those employees happy on a number of fronts. There's evidence that it reduces healthcare costs when you manage these things, whether it's pregnancy or menopause or anything that takes a specific holistic focus to dealing with conditions. We're seeing an increase in productivity, we're seeing a reduction in turnover, and we're seeing a reduction in surge costs. So since I come at this from a capitalist perspective, I always feel like you have to lead with the business argument. There are compelling economic reasons to be doing this. And we see employees going into their benefits department and saying, so-and-so gets to use milk stork where they nurse and freeze and then ship their breast milk
Right.
when they're traveling. I want that too. So there's a lot more, I'll say, activism on the part of employees. The other piece is really when you're looking at the economic models, they really start to make sense. There's a huge percentage of women who leave the workforce after giving birth to whatever number child or adopting or however they create their family. And still a smaller percentage come back, and we're losing a lot of talent. And the same with menopause. You know, there's a huge percentage, more than 50% of women who have experienced menopause symptoms who have considered leaving the workplace. And I think this confluence of factors is really a good analogy for women's health. You can't look at any aspect of women's health without looking at the psychological, the physiological, the financial, the social, the contextual, the behavioral. So women's health is having this moment because all these factors are coming together at the same time. And I personally like to think of Dr. Biden's White House initiative on women's health as the result of all this amazing activity and momentum. It's continuing a path that people were on as opposed to the beginning of the journey. There are a lot of people in this conversation and on this journey. And in addition to Oprah saying that she's in menopause being a big plus, it's absolutely great when the government announces an enormous pot of money to focus on things that we haven't historically focused on.
Yeah. So let me ask you about, because a lot of my audience, as you know, are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right? Working at companies, but I mean, that's a very detailed background, and it's really good to understand the landscape and where things are going, and that there is, you know, there's financing that's involved. You mentioned financing in a number of ways. You mentioned funds, right? Women's funds. And if you have any, I know we don't have a lot of time today, but I'd love to put some in the show notes afterwards for women to take a look at. So if there's any funds or resources from the government, particularly any like you know, national care systems, right, that's supporting women. But I do have a question about for female entrepreneurs. So women that aren't necessarily going for jobs, right? But they are women and they're going through the cycles. Then, you know, can you point to any resources for female entrepreneurs to look into, whether it's city, state, to as they scale their businesses and grow their businesses, and maybe they want to bring on these benefits for their own employees? Do you know anything about that, or is there any resources?
So there are tons and tons and tons and tons of resources. So, you know, at the state level, a lot of states have an economic development authority. They talk you through the process of how you fundraise. I mentioned something at the national level. There are lots of grants, small business grants from the National Institutes of Health and other parts of the government. And there are a bunch of great angel funds. Portfolio, which is a collection of angel funds. I happen to be involved in their femtech funds, but they have active aging, they have longevity, they have sustainability. There are a number of VCs that tend to focus on women's health and or female entrepreneurs like Amboy, Coyote, Avestria, Steel Sky, True Wealth. And they don't necessarily all just hone in on women's health, but many of them focused on diverse entrepreneurs solving problems that haven't had good solutions before or that need better solutions. So, you know, ask anyone who's ever fundraised, and I've done it a lot for my businesses. I've done it a ton for other people's businesses. You know, as they say, it's not for the faint of heart. You do have to kiss a lot of frogs. I have yet to meet the entrepreneur who says, well, I went to my first investment meeting and they wrote me a check, you know, said no, never.
It doesn't happen.
So, and it really is, you know, there are a lot of resources for, you know, funds that smaller funds, less than $200 million. There are resources that support women building entrepreneurial skills. Like Springboard is a program. Alice is another program. So anything you can ask for, there are resources. I'm happy to help if people feel inundated and they have a list to help them weed through it, because the most pressing resource you have as an entrepreneur
It's time.
is time, quickly followed by money, and they're very,
Yes,
very
time and
related.
money.
Yeah, I happen to be someone who I'm reading constantly. Every day I'm reading newsletters, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm watching videos. It's a constant learning process. I'm speaking to people, I'm interviewing people. So it's not just a one and done. There are lots of people who are going back for executive education. I'm not going to say that's necessary or it's not required, but it's really important to have a network of people you can reach out to for financing, for support, for your own personal board of directors. And there are tons of resources if you start to look of these groups that are looking for entrepreneurs who are in similar stages, who want to share best practices, because I've always felt like everyone's going to make mistakes. I'd rather have the next person make a different mistake or spend less time on the same mistake I made if I can be useful in that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it is about sharing experiences as well. I thank you for offering if any women do have kind of questions as they navigate around that, because can be mind-boggling. And I also like that
It's really overwhelming.
Yeah, but I also like that you pointed to, reading, learning, talking, because it's the only way you can connect. And, just because one door closes doesn't mean the next one's going to be wide open for you, right? Depending on what it is. I mean,
100%. And every day I'm learning something. Some things that I want to learn that feel very relevant, and some things, that feel less so. Like, how do you set up, certain systems in areas where there usually are other people who focus on that. But you really have to have also, one of the other things I say to entrepreneurs all the time is you have to have endurance. You need emotional endurance, financial endurance, and physical endurance.
Yes, you definitely need all three.
I mean, I've known you for a long time. You've always been running as fast as you can, and you're a creator and coming up with new ideas all the time. And lots of people come up with ideas and let them just, sit in a mental file cabinet. But for folks like you and lots of the people that I work with, we're constantly coming up with new ideas, new ways to figure out how to grow businesses, new ways to reach customers, new ways to gain distribution or to drive sales or to raise funds or to create strategic partnerships. So really all my work is focused on what I call pragmatic strategy. How do you get people to buy what you're selling?
Yeah.
Whether it's a service, whether it's a product, whether it's an experience. What do you need to say? What do you need to offer? What do you need to do? Where do you need to position all these things? Where do you need to place them? What should the price be in order to someone to buy what you're selling? Like you, for instance, have had enormous success using LinkedIn as your platform to get people to buy what you're selling. When you're working in women's health, sometimes insurers are your buyers. Sometimes employers are your buyers. Sometimes healthcare practitioners are your buyers. Sometimes patients are your buyers. Sometimes, regular old consumers are your buyers. And you really need to understand that and the business model that's going to support whatever you're running. And I really obsess about business model. And just for people who think about that, it's how you're going to keep the lights on.
100%.
What are you selling through what channels at what price? So, for instance, some people run a subscription business, so you have ongoing revenue on a monthly basis. Other people sell membership. Other people sell products. Other people sell packages. There's so many different ways to do it, and you really have to be hyper aware of who your target is. And if you learn more and you find out your target is a little bit different, revising it and figuring out how to offer what they're selling.
100%. It's about, I think I revise my business model every week, in some little area, tweak some little area, because.
Well, you're constantly learning.
Because I'm a marketing optimizing person. So it's like,
exactly.
I teach all entrepreneurs about that, because you know what, you don't want to keep going in the wrong direction. And it's not, don't be afraid to ask. I love how open you are. It's like,
and I go by the adage, the smartest person is the one who doesn't know what he or she doesn't know. So if I'm not the expert in the room, I'm going to, after years of being consulting and building businesses, I'm going to look for the smartest person that I have access to, that I can get on the phone, that I could get to respond to a text to talk to me about that particular area. And as everybody knows, there are experts everywhere. I always start with a personal recommendation. So if I wanted to know something in SEO or digital and Jasmine wasn't available, Jasmine, you know, you'd be the first person I'd call to say, for a company this size, who do I go to? And then it's still on the entrepreneur to vet the person, to make sure they have experience that's relevant to you. You know, when I'm looking for new partners in women's health, I'm looking for a couple of things. I want to make sure that they are willing to talk about the space, because there are all kinds of hindrances, some of which are just personal. I want to know that they've built, that they haven't just taken billion-dollar brands and made them bigger, but they can start from zero and grow them, because so many of the companies in this space, you know, are venture backed and they're just starting. So there's always someone who knows more about something. And with a real emphasis that I've always had on relationships, having a network of people you go to for different reasons is really important. So for instance, for me, one source of real pride is I worked at or for J&J as an employee or a service provider for, you know, 30 years.
Yeah.
And people left J&J and took me with them, and they would change jobs within there, and they would take me with them. And so to me, any success I've had in my career comes down to, you know, obviously drive and commitment and all those things and focus, but capitalizing on the relationships. And it's a two-way street. Everybody's met the person who's always asking for something, and that doesn't go over that well.
No.
You're constantly in the business of giving and doing nothing else. You know,
Yeah.
that might be the right balance, not the right balance, but there is a lot of reciprocity.
And it's also just understanding the value. Like if you called me and had a question, you know, I have other clients that I've had for like 15 years. They'll call me. Okay, what do you need? You know,
Right.
and it shouldn't be tit for tat. It's really like you said. I mean, you have an expert kind of in your circles, and it's reciprocity. So,
But one thing I
that's
would
my-
caution women warriors about in particular
yes,
is, you know, I'll say as a woman in women's health, and I'm sure you have it as a female entrepreneur that's focused frequently on women, people want a lot of stuff for free. And if you have a business model where you can support giving everything away for free,
good
you
for
know,
you. You're
have
retired.
at it. But you know, I've had many conversations where they say, well, you know, we want to do this on success fee only, which means it has to go to a transaction. I say, that's great. That's the objective. But there's so many pieces of that are out of my control.
Mhm.
And so I've had companies say, we want to do this success fee only. And I say, great, good luck. You know, that's not me, but, you know, feel free to come back if you have other questions that
Yep.
then say, it's really difficult to find the right person. And if Jasmine, you're the right person, you're not going to give away your expertise
No.
for free. In our case, time is money. But every single thing in being an entrepreneur, just like being alive or being a parent or being part of a family, everything's a trade-off.
Absolutely. I mean, so I just want to touch on speaking then for a second, and then I want to talk about women's history, and I know you got to catch a train. So
To actually speak about women's history.
to speak about
in
women's history.
DC,
So speaking, right? So this
yes.
is a big soapbox of mine, right? Don't speak for free unless it's a nonprofit or you're building your speaking business, right? Talk to us a little bit about you as a speaker and your philosophy on speaking.
So there are a couple of different scenarios. When I first started, I really did speak for free. And I think at that time you
Yeah, when you're
encouraged me
building.
to say, get your name out there. At this point, I've done, you know, over 300 keynotes, presentations,
Yes.
panels, podcasts, whatever you call it. You really have to be clear on what is the goal of your business. For me, it's always been nice to have it as a revenue stream, but it's not the core of what I build my business on.
Yeah.
It gives credibility. It gives, you know, gravitas. It sort of presents the experience that you have in a very public way. And to me, doing it for free all the time is not a good use of your time. So there are places that don't pay. You know, you go to South by Southwest, everybody wants to go. I've gone, it's amazing. It's great networking. You don't get paid.
No.
That's something where everybody's treated equally. There are other ones where people want you to pay to play, where if you pay, if you sponsor, if you do this, you can speak. I personally never do those.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my expertise has to be worth something. One of the great resources for this is an organization called Innovation Women,
Yeah.
which is about women building their own brands and their own speaking careers. And they spend a lot of time matching speakers to events. And the pricing piece is a big deal. It's also the time. So am I going to fly to California from New York, which is 2 days out of my life, plus expenses, to speak for free? Depends. Am I speaking at the Rose Bowl? Maybe I'll do that. You know, am I speaking at halftime at the Super Bowl? Maybe I'll do that. But you have to always consider the cost benefit. And for me, that often means getting paid. That often means almost always getting reimbursed for any expenses.
Absolutely.
But when you invest in speaking, you really do have to take the long game as to what comes back. So, you know, when I wrote the book that you mentioned, you know, very few people make actual huge amounts of money from a book. What the book does is put you in front of audiences and gives you opportunities to sell what it is that you actually sell. So when I look at the ROI on my book, it's certainly not coming from book sales. It's coming from all the positions I was in, places I was, conversations I had as a result of having that book. So that was a long-winded answer. Sometimes, especially if you're starting, you're going to have to speak for free. If you decide to do it, let it be your choice. You can turn things down. You will get smarter about what works. I mean, I'm much smarter about where I want to speak and what I want to speak about now than I was when I started speaking, let's say 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of speaker groups where you can, you know, learn from other people. You can find speakers that you're interested, get some ideas, how they work. I'm often in conversations with speakers where, you know, what do you charge for a keynote? This is what I charge. Do you do it by location? And you're constantly learning and revising your own model so that it works.
Yeah, I've also found as a keynote speaker myself, I like connecting with others. If I'm going to do a conference, which I've done a gazillion, I like actually connecting with I find that a tip for other speakers is to, like you said, connect with other speakers when you're speaking at a conference, build a relationship, because I have found that will help you. They'll think, you know, you'll be top of mind to them when maybe there's a slot for a paid speaking engagement, if you're at that level. So,
well, I mean, one like really compelling example is I got a call from someone, and this was during COVID when everybody was doing all their speaking on Zoom.
yeah.
Who said, I heard you speak.
Mhm.
Let's have a conversation, and connected me to a person who didn't hear me speak, who I never met, who became a long-term client. So you never know where these things are going to lead. One piece of advice I would have is spend more time on the business of doing your business, of building your business, you know, speaking to support your business, than talking about the different setups and payment structures you're going to have for your business. You want to spend as little time talking about these transactions and negotiating the individual proposals versus doing the work, which really, in my experience, has been, you know, the best advertisement.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you will make mistakes. You will definitely, I mean, you will make mistakes. One of my favorite, there are a couple things, you know, people who give speeches, there's a whole thing like, I only invest in people who fail. And, you know, I probably failed 5 times already today. I failed many times in my life. I'm a big believer. It doesn't matter what happens when you fall down, but when you get up. But I also say, when you fail, it hurts. It takes time. It's painful. It could be painful economically. It could be painful physically. It could be painful emotionally. So while it's, you know, a feather in your cap, it takes work to get past it. Not for everybody. And it depends, again, how big the defeat is. Brene Brown, who I happen to love, and I always paraphrase this, and I hope I get it mostly right, is she has this expression where she says, if you're not feeling nervous, or if something doesn't scare you, you're not trying hard enough. And
Yeah.
so when you get that feeling in your stomach, which lots of people do, some it's a feeling of excitement, others it's an experience of terror. I hear that all the time. You know, I'd rather be, Seinfeld said, you know, the two things people are most afraid of, the first is public speaking, the second is death. And, you know, the second one ensures that you can't do public speaking. You know, for me, I get a lot of energy from an audience.
Oh, yeah.
I light up. It gives me, I get animated. I love the stories. I become alive. That works for me. But you have to really figure out, you know, how to recover from things that don't work. Anyway, she said, going back to Brene Brown, she says, if you're not scared, you're not trying hard enough. And so for me, that was like a light bulb went on, and it changed how I interpret a feeling that I might get. You know, if you get a tightness in your stomach, or, you know, you find that your mind is racing, oh, this must be a sign that this is hard. This means I have to do it because it feels hard and I'm going to have to make it happen.
Yep. And making it happen it moves you, it helps you grow.
Right. And that means you'll
Period.
have a lot of unsuccessful conversations, unsuccessful negotiations, you know, emails left unresponded to, people ghosting you. All of that happens. It happens to everybody. And to me, the victor is the one who focuses on the right things long enough in an intelligent and strategic way to get to the outcomes that you need. Because this is a long haul.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So Women's History, let's talk about Women's History Month for a second. So as I said up front, you know, I see you as, first of all, a warrior woman, of course, in business. God, you should have just named this whole thing. And, you know, Women's History Month. So when I started this, you know, I'm not this Me Too type of person.
The
at all.
hashtag Me
I'm a
Too you're talking
tomboy, I'm a
about.
hockey player,
Yes.
guys, girls, doesn't matter to me.
Right.
So
A rock star, you should add that.
well, yeah, I was actually going to give the quick analogy about when you said you get nervous. So I go to Juilliard. I'm in my third semester, and I'm competing against like the top vocalists in New York City. And every time I go up to sing, I have knots in my stomach, and I'm like, it's perfect. You know, speaking in front of 1,000 people does nothing to me. Singing in front of 7 people kills me. So, and every time I grow, and so, you know, you just got to go for it. But
But the
anyways,
growth doesn't always feel good. It's not always enjoyable, but you get
no,
there
because
if you stick with it. You could have walked out, this is not how you're put together, but you could have walked out after semester 1 of having that feeling. And now you're in semester 3. And I'm sure not only do you feel stronger every time, but your skills are improving and you're building a community of people who might be resources for you as you pursue yet another area of expertise.
a very important career for me is music. So as far as Women's History Month and women, right? So what I was getting to is, you know, there are these periods, these months, these holidays, you know what I'm saying? Women's History Month, International Women's Day, Me Too, you know, these little movements. And I would like to understand, since you really are in the space of supporting women, especially health, so physical and mental, as you mentioned, how do you think that we can really keep this going? The support of other women, like really keep it going so it doesn't keep becoming a conversation and really becomes ongoing action, the same way you approach your business.
Yeah, and I think exactly what you said is the point. March being the month for women, it's great, but what are you doing with it? What are you doing with the platforms you have? You know, are you going someplace and selling your book? Are you going someplace and volunteering? For me, especially in women's health, there's always a conversation, you know, what do you think of the word femtech? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think about this focus on women and International Women's Day? And I'm very consistent. I might be an outlier. I think the conversation is the first step to change anything. You know, all these changes that we're seeing in women's health, it wouldn't happen if people weren't naming body parts and talking about them and demanding change and going to their insurance companies and creating businesses to provide the services that they weren't getting. So I know there are lots of people who say, you know, we don't just want to be female CEOs, we want to be CEOs. And I agree with all that. I want everybody to be evaluated on their absolute merits. Merits, unfortunately, are not objective. People come with all kinds of biases, conscious and unconscious. And
You're right.
my feeling is anytime you can have a conversation about an issue that's important to you, two things. One, know what your objective is. And two, take advantage of those opportunities. And it isn't always to proselytize. I don't think of it as my job to make everyone I meet care about women's health.
Yeah.
It's just not my goal. Anyone who gives me the time of day, I'll talk to them about how they can make money from women's health. And I can talk to them about how systems can save money with women's health. But it's never, you should just care about women's health because it's the right thing to do. You have to really understand people's motivation. And for me, having times of the year or moments or days set apart is your catalyst to have conversations that will lead to action. And I'm with you. It's like a business with no revenue is an expensive hobby. A conversation with no action, it's wonderful. It might be mind expanding, but without the action, nothing changes.
You're right. Nothing changes. It definitely takes action. And I think, I feel like sometimes you're in it so much, it's hard to take yourself outside of it and see what's happening, and this goes back to the business model. This goes
Yep.
back to optimization. This goes back to what you were talking about, seeing your business, looking at women's health, women supporting women, and doing some metrics around it and seeing,
Yeah, figuring out what's working.
is this really working or is it not working?
I'm obsessed with metrics.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
Did things go up or down? Did they go sideways? What's the net promoter score? Again, while some of these things can be qualitative, if you're not measuring the direction you're going, you have no idea whether to double down in that area or redirect. So, constantly, almost daily, you don't want to be changing your strategy
No.
as an entrepreneur, but you do want to be taking in the input, the information, the learning, and saying, where should I go from here?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm working with this business called Pulse, which is a device and consumable that, it's a device that warms and dispenses hands-free, these beautiful lubricants and massage oils.
Oh.
And the founder had built it discovering that she was going through menopause. That was the catalyst for her to create this business.
Right.
But then you learn who's actually buying it and you see you have a much bigger opportunity. So, always listen to your customer. And if you don't know who it is, ask enough questions until you start to get smarter about who your customer is. Because again, I like a transaction to take place where currency is exchanged. That to me is the fundamental requirement
business.
of building a business.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. People get lost in all the language and all the doing, especially entrepreneurs, and all the doing and all the ideas, but
And
it's
you
about.
don't have time for all the,
Yeah, that's why
you have to be very stingy about how you spend your time.
I love talking about operations. I mean, I think that's like I would like to become an expert in operations.
Well, I'm sure you'll add it to the 17 other things that you could have on your resume.
Yeah, maybe. But we're women in business, right? So
Yep.
I always ask everybody when they hear the term, right? What do they think? So you've been on the podcast before, but now where you are versus where you were the last time we spoke, which was a couple of years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in terms of the term warrior women in business? More importantly, how do you see women approaching business, specifically female entrepreneurs today versus, let's say, 10 years ago? What changes?
So I'll go back further than 10 years. When I started my career in corporate, there was always this old adage that there could only be one successful woman. So when you say warrior women, I don't think of me fighting against other women. I think of having strength and being alongside other people that have strength. So I can certainly speak to women's health. It's incredibly collaborative. The majority of people will answer the call, pick up the phone, respond to a text, and the very few who don't, everybody knows who they are. So I've been amazed at, and I've said this to you before, at the caliber of the people in this space, of the intellect of the people in this space, of the commitment, of the collaborative nature. I mean, we have many times in our space competitors who are working together against a common goal. So, and it's not just in women's health. I think that there are some idiosyncrasies about being a woman in business. And to the extent that you could learn about them and overcome the ones that need to be overcome and learn from people who have done it before, more the better. You know, why
Yeah.
should I, if I'm a new entrepreneur, go into an investment situation without having any learning from people who have gone in to speak to that investor in this particular space before? Why wouldn't I arm myself, you know, as a warrior with as much information as possible? So to me, again, warrior women is it's an attitude. It's how you approach solving problems. It's how you approach collaborating. And what I like about it is warrior means I have to be prepared. I'm going into battle. There are going to be people in battle next to me, but I have to know what I can bring and what my skills are and what my objectives are and how I might fit into the bigger whole, the whole, not the HOLE, the WHOLE.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so it's, you have to be prepared, but it's also the women piece of it is a collaborative piece.
It
And
can be. And that doesn't, you had said
it's not
women,
about
men,
fighting,
so
it's
like
about
you need,
collaborating, but bringing the value,
you
right?
need
And
to have, you know, in any women's movement, you need men as allies in any
oh, yes, of course,
social setting, in any business setting.
of course.
You can't just only deal with women, only talk to one group.
Yeah. And you have to
So
know
you
how to
have to
talk to
be
all groups.
skilled, but there are
Mhm.
benefits to learning from other women as opposed to feeling like somehow that's holding me back.
Yeah,
When you
absolutely.
have a particularly horrible conversation in an investor's office, it feels better when you've done this only a couple of times. Now I've done it hundreds of times. It feels better to know this is how they behave. This has nothing to do with you. Like I used to say to my kids when they were little, if someone behaves in a nasty way, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. When I first started in
Great
business,
advice.
I said that I didn't always really in my guts believe it. Now
Mhm.
it's 100% true. If someone is nasty or overreacts or slams down the phone or behaves in a way that I don't think I myself would behave in a professional setting, it's not that I can't learn anything, but oftentimes it's more about them than it is about you. And when people speak to you in a way that's, you know, not polite or elegant or reflecting any manners, I really do try to listen. Is there any content in here
Mm,
that can be useful?
mm. It's a very objective way of looking at it, but also very good. Okay, so I know we only have
Fighting women is a really important support system to have.
oh yeah, absolutely. So I know we only have a couple of minutes, so I just want to, do you have any closing? First of all, thank you. And I know after this, when we put in the show notes, we're going to put some resources when we get to it, and also Rachel's contact information, of course. She really has been one of my role models, one of my mentors. So I
You're
really
so nice to say
appreciate it.
that.
And a friend, most
And
importantly.
I've learned a ton from Jasmine as well. So it goes back to that reciprocity. When I first met Jasmine, she spoke a language that I didn't understand. And she, you know, was the person who understood the magic behind LinkedIn when nobody was talking about it. So it's really nice to hear that it's been a mutually beneficial, I know it's been a mutually beneficial relationship.
100%. So wanted to know what kind of closing remarks you have about Women's History Month, anything that you have coming up, where people might be able to see you speak or your podcast, anything you want to mention.
So we really are excited about the podcast called Business of the V. So if there are any people who are related in some way to women's health, whether as an investor, a problem solver, a scientist, an entrepreneur, would love to hear from you. I think that there are a couple of things that I've gathered over the years of working, and they're very basic. As you said, they're not rocket science. You don't give up. Someone's going to get your yes if you give up. If you get 100 no's, you never know if it's going to be the 101st person you speak to that's going to be a yes. Keep your sense of humor. That helps me, not just in
Yeah.
Women's Month, but every month, because I remember an entrepreneur once said to me, an investor once said to me, oh, this is such a hard decision. It's like choosing between your children, you know, if you have more than one child.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, no, it's so not like that.
Yeah.
It's not like
A
that.
weird
You know,
analogy,
there
but
are people who are, I mean, yeah, it's the end extreme. It's not that there are not lots of people doing important and truly life-saving work.
yeah.
But you can't lose your sense of humor or whatever is your coping mechanism. That happens to be mine, because life is long. You know, building a business takes a long time.
It surely
Building
does.
relationships takes a long time. So you need some way to sort of reinforce yourself. One of the things I do like about these announced occasions is it does catalyze lots of conversations, lots of meeting. You know, I'm speaking tomorrow in Washington in a series called Teach, Give, Inspire. And there's one speaker for each of those areas. The way I got that engagement, someone heard me speak somewhere else. You know, I know that there's a lot of businesses that do something special for Women's Month or International History Day, whether it's increased collaboration, investment, donation. There are so many different ways to honor and celebrate and bring meaning to this month. And it shouldn't just be every month should be Women's History Month, in the sense that we are making history all the time, but take advantage if there are things that are created, systems that are created, for you to move your conversations ahead or your businesses ahead. And there are all kinds of conferences this month, even more, I think, normally because of Women's History Month. Those are great things to take advantage of. And, you know, at some point, hopefully we'll have hundreds every month, but if circumstances create an opportunity to elevate something you're working on, take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's what it's all about. Like looking out for the people that can support you, other experts, the events that are going on, and not just making it a one-time, 1-month thing, but really bringing that on a yearly level, in those relationships. I know tomorrow I'm attending the Morgan Stanley Women's Executive Breakfast, which
Cool.
you know, by Sarah Bean Ricker, which I absolutely love. I've met so many amazing women through just going to those breakfasts once a quarter. Right. I think there's a few things going on next week. There's so many things going on.
There's more things than you can do. Absolutely.
There's more things than you can do. It's like, which one do I do?
Right.
You know,
and there are organizations that say, here are the 10 things we're doing for Women's History Month. Pick one that's interesting. I always had a shorthand. So there are so many events in the kind of work that I do. And I always worked. I now have adult children. But I used to say, as soon as I meet one person who will be a valuable follow-up, I'm out of there. So if I get there at 7 and 7:05.
in my philosophy.
I've had a sip of
I want to
Diet
give you a
Coke
high
and I've
five
had
on that one, Rachel.
You know, you can't do everything. You can't be at every event. You can't be at every meeting. You can't do everything. And so to me, sort of the most, I'd say that the thing that really makes you feel like a grown-up is knowing that you have to make all these choices.
Absolutely. That actually leads me to my a few announcements that I have. I met Pamela Rickman. I don't know if you know Pamela.
I do. I was at her book launch. I don't know if she's written another book since. Back in the day. I mean, we got introduced serendipitously.
So
she's terrific.
She's my next guest on Monday, talking about her book, Candace Pert, and talking about the changes in how not just women approach health, but the entire health industry in Western medicine versus Eastern medicine. It's going to be a very interesting episode. So I met her through the Women's Executive Breakfast, and I went there, I met her, I said, okay, I can leave then. And and that's being efficient with your time.
And that's a choice. That doesn't work for everybody. Like if I've dragged myself to this meeting, I'm certainly going to wait till they bring out the sushi, whatever. But
oh yeah, there's champagne, I'm staying. But yeah, so I have Pamela Rickman coming up. I have Ava Mueller coming up, who is a big time fashion photographer and very good friend of mine. In fact, I'm going to her studio next to interview her live, and she's going to be talking about all the crazy, amazing arts and entertainment events that are going on in New York City supporting Women's History Month. So this month, I can't even tell you how much we have going on at Warrior Women in Business. After this month is done, we'll be planning events, so look out for those in New York City as well as in Beverly Hills. And again, I want to really thank Rachel for being on. She's like, you should listen to this episode about 1,000 times because she has so much wisdom that if you just took a few pieces from this, you could grow your business pretty fast. So again, I want to thank you, Rachel, for being on. I know how busy you are, and
Well,
you know,
it's
I
great to see you as always. Keep
look
up the
forward to
good
seeing you
work.
in real life, as we say.
Yes.
Soon. But I'd like to just remind everybody, if you have any questions about this episode or the Warrior Women Business Organization, getting involved, being a guest, coming to an event, please reach out to us at warriorwomenbusiness.com. Everything is in the show notes. Reach out to us in social media. Again, I'm your host, Jasmine Sandler, and I want to thank everybody and wish everybody a wonderful Women's History Month. Signing off from episode 48.